Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The anger over the payoffs to Carillion bosses was widespread, but today it emerged that the directors stopped receiving bonuses or severance payments on the day the company went bust. In addition, the Insolvency Service has said that 90% of the company's private contractors have said they will go on paying the workers providing services to them until new suppliers can be found to take on the work. Our business editor, Siobhan Kennedy, is in Birmingham. Siobhan.
Well, John, the big news, as you said there, today the Insolvency Service saying that they would strip the bonuses and severance payments from some key former executives who have now left Carillion. But what I am also being told tonight, John, is that they will go even further with regard to the former chief executive of Carillion, Richard Howson, and the former finance director, Zafir Khan. They will now no longer receive the hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of salary that they were entitled to receive up until the end of October this year. Now, that's natural justice, some might say, but it will be little consolation to the near 1,500 apprentices who work for Carillion and who earn just on average about £125 a week, and who don't know, John, whether or not that money will be continued to be paid to them. We went to see some of them today.
These things don't normally happen to people my age.
The collapse of the construction giant Carillion is massive on any scale, but it's the small details that tell the real story. 18-year-old Jordan Barnes was a Carillion apprentice and using his earnings to save for his first flat. Now he has no idea what the future holds.
Soon I'm moving out of my parents' house, so if Carillion going under means I don't get paid anymore, I'm going to go and have to find alternative employment pretty quickly.
Might you lose the flat?
Well, I'd have to have it first, but it certainly wouldn't help.
Tell me, one of the reasons you went to Carillion, or you chose Carillion, why is it? What did you think about them?
Well, I thought they were good. I knew they did a lot of work for the government. I think there was mention that they built army bases, they built hospitals, they maintain a lot of transport stuff as well. They do a lot of work for the public as a whole, so I figured it was a safe company to work for, but obviously I was wrong.
It turns out Jordan is one of 1,400 plus apprentices who were working for Carillion right up until its collapse on Monday, the biggest employer of trainees in the sector. Aaron learned his trade here at Sandwell College in Birmingham, and on Monday was working for one of Carillion's subcontractors at its flagship hospital development up the road when the news came through.
How do you feel when you heard the news?
Really gutted. Like, I felt like I had a big opportunity and I've just been left in the dark.
Is that how it feels?
Yeah.
Why? I mean, are you not getting the information, or?
Monday it was just total confusion. Like, I didn't know what to think. Like, I don't know what's happening next.
The fate of Carillion's apprentices is now in the hands of the government's Insolvency Service, which is running the defunct Carillion. This is where Aaron should be today, at the Metropolitan Hospital, but 3 days after Carillion's collapse, and the cranes were still and work is yet to continue, despite assurances of funding from the government. Today, though, the Insolvency Service did confirm that work on Carillion's other private construction sites would be paused, pending decisions, it said, as to how and if they will be restarted. That applies to sites like these, a private multi-million-pound project in the centre of Birmingham, ironically including a new office for the accountancy firm PwC, which is now advising on Carillion's liquidation. There was a glimmer of good news today, though, that outside construction, 90% of Carillion's other private clients, like BT and Nationwide, said they would keep employing the Carillion staff they use, at least for now. The Insolvency Service also said any bonus payments since Carillion's collapse would be stopped, including severance payments for senior executives who have left the company. They didn't name names, but the key senior figures to have left are former Chief Executive Richard Howson and former Finance Director Zafar Khan. In addition, a source told this programme they would now not receive their ongoing salary payments of $660,000 paid to Mr Howson and $425,000 due to Mr Khan. At the other end of the scale, Jordan's not been told if he'll receive the £125 a week he's paid by Carillion, which means for this week he's worked for nothing.
Siobhan Kennedy reporting, well, unsurprisingly, Carillion's collapse dominated Prime Minister's questions today. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn accusing the government of being negligent, Theresa May insisting that the government is focused on keeping public services running. Our political editor Gary Gibbon is in Westminster now. Gary, what are the political implications?
Consensus at the centre of British politics, left and right, that moving big chunks of public sector provision to the private sector is a good thing. Jeremy Corbyn came on the scene and kind of blew that apart, and he feels Carillion absolutely crystallises his argument. So he was making that case in the Commons today, and Theresa May was coming back at him saying that this all proves that he's anti-business. But Theresa May would not have chosen this terrain, this moment, to defend stuff like this. And of course, the Carillion saga is meaning that she is actually having to re-evaluate some aspects of how this whole thing is done. So it's not firm terrain that she is on. This is how the exchanges today went.
These corporations, Mr. Speaker, need to be shown the door. We need our public services provided by public employees with a public service ethos and a strong public oversight. As the ruins of Carillion lie around her, will the Prime Minister act to end this costly racket of the relationship between government and some of these companies?
I might first of all remind the right honourable gentleman that a third of the Carillion contracts with the government were let by the Labour government. What we want is to provide good quality public services delivered at best value to the taxpayer. We're making sure in this case that public services continue to be provided, that the workers in those public services are supported and taxpayers are protected.
That mantra that Theresa May is repeating there about best value for the taxpayer has been the mantra of the consensus. Putting stuff into the private sector has been all about bringing the cost down. But you have to look at this saga at the moment and see that whatever happens, whoever wins, whichever argument wins, costs are going up. If you bring back some of these services into the public sector, well, presumably you're going to bring back some of the paying conditions that used to make the bill there slightly higher. If you put them out to another private sector contractor and try and get them to do the work, well, they can point at Carillion and say, well, their profits weren't big enough. That's why that company nosedived. We need bigger profits. So you can see whatever happens, it looks as though the bills are going up. What's the impact of this all going to be? I think that depends on how long and how messily this particular saga goes on, but also if there are more such sagas round the corner.
Gary Gibbon in Westminster, and we'll be debating the government's response in a moment.
Now back to our main report tonight, the collapse of the construction services company Carillion. Joining us now from the House of Commons, Labour MP and Chair of the Business Committee, Rachel Reeves, and the Conservative MP, Kwasi Kwarteng, Parliamentary Private Secretary to the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Kwasi Kwarteng, I mean, in a sense, temporarily, it's better news tonight in that we're being told that 90% of the workers could keep their jobs. Does that mean the government's been throwing money at Carillion or the remnants of Carillion?
No, I think David Lidington was very clear in his statement to the House of Commons on Monday. The company's difficulties largely stem from its contracts in the private sector. Now, 60% of its revenues, as I understand, were private sector contracts. The government contracts were 40%, and the government has said a number of things. It said that taxpayers will not be liable for the losses. It'll be the creditors and the shareholders that will be liable. And also, as you've observed, the people working on the public sector side of public sector contracts, they will be guaranteed employment. I mean, they will be looked after. The government will have a responsibility for them. Now, there's no question that the government will be using taxpayers' money, as far as I understand, to bail out the company.
Right. OK, well, now, Rachel Reeves, does that stack up to you, or do you suspect there is public money swilling about here somewhere?
Well, I don't think we're clear at the moment in the answer to that question, but I think the idea that everything is OK today is far from the truth. If you are one of the 30,000 subcontractors that Carillion use, I think that nothing could be further from the truth. Many construction sites are closed. Many small businesses are worried that they will never get paid, because remember, Carillion were paying subcontractors 120 days after the work was done. So many subcontractors haven't been paid since the summer, and now it looks like little chance that they will get paid. And so it's a very worrying time for those small businesses, many of whom will go to the wall, I fear, because of Carillion's collapse. And the government have known, at least since December, when Carillion came to them with their difficulties, but really since July, when the first profit warnings came through, that there were problems here. And it doesn't seem to me that enough thought has been given to how we can support the small businesses and the subcontractors that rely on Carillion, and many of those are very fearful for their future today.
Now, a lot of people, quasi-Quatang, were extremely angry to learn that there was a possibility that there were bosses in the company being paid right up till next October. Now, can you confirm to us, because we've only heard this as a report, we've not had it officially confirmed, that none of the bosses will be paid anything from the moment at which the thing collapsed?
Look, I completely share people's anxiety and concern about this. I think it's quite wrong that people should be benefiting beyond, that they ran the company into the ground. But let's rewind and
but
just
is that a guarantee that they won't be paid anything?
I cannot guarantee you.
Well, will the government
I cannot guarantee. You know that,
on
John. You know I can't guarantee anything of that kind.
But you can make an expression of demand that they should not be paid.
I've expressed my views very clearly. The Prime Minister said at question time PMQs today that it's a private company. The government doesn't control the company. The government was a client, but it doesn't control the company. And she's also expressed deep reservations about the idea that these people are going to get hundreds of thousands of pounds, for an indefinite time in the future. What I wanted to say, actually, is that we can play political games about this, but of course, your viewers should know, and I'm sure many of them do know, that PFI, public-private sector partnerships were very much an innovation of the Labour government.
Well, no, they were very much John Major's government.
But you know as well as I do that your government.
I don't think that this sort of conversation is going to help anybody who relies on the
very courteously allowed you to speak. You've interrupted me. You know.
Yeah, but
that under the Labour government,
with great respect, Quasi-Quatang, what is the point of going into who did or did not do something years ago?
Because,
I mean, some say it's John Major, some say it was Labour.
John, I think it's very important.
The point that John is trying to make is that there are executives who lost their jobs last July.
No, the point I'm trying to make, forgive me,
but the question that was being asked was about the payment to these executives.
The point that was being asked to me was about why, he asked me why we're raking over the past. And I'm saying this was a joint Labour and Conservative initiative, and that when things go wrong,
you've both got to get away to a division. But I want to ask you, Rachel Reeves. I mean, the specific issue really now is what happens now, because there are now 8 or 10 of these companies, like Carillion, who have these massive undertakings. At least one of them is rumoured to be not in good shape. Do you know anything about that? And in which case, when is an inventory going to be offered as to when all this is going to be clarified?
Well, I think we now need to look at the whole array of contracts, from government to these private sector huge companies on whom many people rely for work, subcontractors and small businesses rely on, but also all of us, whether we're patients at hospitals, parents sending our children to school and relying on school meals, prison officers who are in prisons that are run by them. And so I do think, John, that you're right, that we need to urgently look at this whole array of contracts that the government have with these big companies to see whether they are viable and whether there are risks in other parts of the economy.
You've got to go,
this is not just about
a very quick one, Quasi-Quatang. Do you have any word on what's happening to any one of these other 8 or 10 companies? Is there one in trouble?
I'm not privy to any inside knowledge about what's going on in these companies. Of course, the government has a responsibility to taxpayers, and we'll be looking at these contracts very scrupulously.
Well, thank you very much, both of you, for risking the division. Go for it. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
God, what we go.